Dear friends, this is the third video of my series in which I'm introducing the basic ideas of good governance and system reform to India. They are all referred to in my book as well as in the Sonic Ichuria agenda in great detail. So this is only an outline, but it sort of serves the purpose of highlighting the key pillars of good governance. And if I draw your attention back to the two pillars, the first of these two pillars was institutional reform, and that included political or electoral reform and bureaucratic reform. The second pillar really is all about the role of the government. So now that we have a government, what should it do and what it should not do? So these are the two main issues, and in this particular video I will cover the first of these, that is, what should a government do? And this harks back to the very formation of the concept of government, which is a kind of a social contract, as you might call it. I've explained this at great length in my second book, which is still under being drafted. It's called The Discovery of Freedom. It's available on the internet, and you can look at chapter 4, where I describe quite extensively the concept of social contract and how it actually is a realistic applicable concept, and why it has helped us in creating a government agency to solve certain problems that we could not solve on our own individual effort. And the key problems that we couldn't solve without the government are clearly defense from external attack, internal security, that is through the police and other such arrangements, and finally we have justice. So these three are the main reasons why we have created government in the first place. So these three are the ones that the government should focus on, should spend most of its effort on, and its energy and money on. And once it has done those well, it can start considering other things which we, for example, might call public goods, things like infrastructure, which is not possible, let's say, by individuals to develop on their own. And of course, the government has a role to regulate markets. Regulation of markets is all about preventing, or rather punishing, bad behavior or fraud or whatever such kind of issues that might arise in a market. So the overall purpose of a government is mostly judicial, as an umpire, as a night watchman, and also as a security guard for us. So imagine you're the owner of your house, and outside is your security guard, and this person is essentially your government. It's a manager of the environment to make sure that nobody attacks you and so on. Then of course there is the issue of justice. So I think we have covered off the first order, or what I call the core functions of the government. And only if it has done these functions well should the government then start doing what I call the second order function. And the second order function is primarily about equality of opportunity. In a humane or civilized society, and I use the word liberal society here, compared to, let's say, a primitive society, we do want everyone to get an equal opportunity to rise to their potential. And that opportunity involves giving absolutely every single child a high quality education, making sure that basic health care is ensured for everybody, but particularly for the poor. For the others, it's not something for the government to get involved, because there is a moral hazard. There are risks of cheating, of all sorts of issues if you start funding the rich people, or if you start entering into every single service directly. Now, these first order functions are all to be directly performed by the government, except maybe infrastructure, where clearly there is a role for the private sector. But in the case of second order functions, there is simply no role for the government in directly managing anything like provision of education, elimination of poverty through a negative income tax or any other such model, social insurance program, or the delivery of health, including emergency care and hospitals. All these are better managed through the private sector, but they are procured by the government under certain incentive-based regulation, contracts and policies. And I will not talk to these in detail now, but I will address them in the coming videos in more detail. And finally, we have those many functions which the government does or pretends to do, but it has no business to be really in that space. I leave out environment protection here for a moment, because environment is a part of justice. I see most of the environmental issues about preserving the wildlife, etc., are more in the regulatory space, more in the good management of markets, and therefore I see that as a role for the government in the first order function, managing the risks of damaging the environment or the negative externalities, as they say. But in areas like sports, or culture or painting or art or any of these kind of things. There is simply no role for a government. These are matters that should be privately managed by the society. It is we as the owners of the society participate in these activities. No doubt there has to be some process, a due process by which, let's say, a national team is sent abroad to the Olympics. But that's not directly related to the issue of managing it. So there's a difference between managing certain things and maybe just coordinating. And that's where I guess the third order functions come in. And those are functions to be performed only if absolutely necessary and to the minimum extent possible. Now, this is the framework. Each of the functions should go through a policy framework of 10 questions, and I won't go into detail. They're all outlined in my book, as well as in the Sonic India Federation, the agenda. What I think we are saying is that if the government restricts itself to these particular activities, the people then get empowered to do whatever they can on their own, and they can do almost anything, because the government is simply a subset of the people, and the smartest people are generally outside the government, because only those who are power hungry or other such, smitten by some other disease of some sort maybe, really try to go towards the government, or generally incompetent perhaps. The real competent people are all outside, and that's how the world has progressed. There are very few really superior people who enter the government. Although there should be some good people who no doubt should be entering the government as well, as I've already spoken to in terms of the institutional reforms. So that, I think, covers off this particular video, which is all about what a government should do. In my next video, the fourth of this series, which will close off, the fifth of my total series so far. One is the overarching, then is the political reform, bureaucratic reform, and now this one about what a government should do. The fifth of this series, the next one, will talk about what the government should not do. And that's where I guess most of the problems arise in India, where the government does a lot of things which it should not do, and in that process it creates an opportunity for corruption and destroys and distorts the economy. Alright, I'll come to that video shortly. Thanks. Bye.